Good morning. This morning I'm going to start a series of talks on the 10 ox-herding pictures of Zen, which we have um, hanging on the wall outside the meeting room here. And they were first depicted in about the 12th century in China as I guess, as an illustration of how one's Zen path might proceed. I say might proceed because everybody's different, you know, and it seems to make sense to a lot of people because it survived 1,000 years, and it's been published in a number of books. And these particular drawings that we have came from the Zen Mountain Monastery in Mount Tremper, New York, and they're fairly recent paintings, but there's different traditional ones. And the first one is Searching for the Ox, and I took it down off the wall, and I'll just shows a young man in the midst of the wilderness and looking around, not knowing where to go. Let's see if I can put it up here. Maybe you can even see it over there. Yeah. And that's called Searching for the Ox. And there's a little verse here on this picture. It says, oh, by the way, the ox represents our true nature, our true self. So that's what the ox means in all of these pictures, actually. And it says here, vigorously cutting a path through the brambles, you search for the ox. Wide rivers and eternal mountains, the path seems endless. With strength depleted and mind exhausted, you cannot find it. There is only the gentle rustle of the maple leaves. So, there's lots of verses about these, but that's one of them. And so, like anything in our practice, you don't really know what they're talking about at a deep level until you experience it yourself. And we've talked about that before. It's hard to explain something to somebody who hasn't experienced it. Like people eat rattlesnake, and you might say, "What does it taste like?" And the standard answer is kind of like chicken, So, but you can relate to that, but you really don't know. But when people first came to Zen practice thousands of years ago, or to Buddhist practice, they weren't really given any instruction. They were just told to sit and quiet their mind. They weren't given any specific instructions. And now, in the present day, people are a lot more sophisticated. They need reasons and specific instructions why we should do this. What's the justification? So, one way of cataloging or categorizing the practice is called the Ox-Herding Pictures. And the first stage, as I mentioned, is searching for the ox. And that's our first genuine resolve to follow the way of the Buddhas and the ancestors. But but many people have heard of this practice, haven't resolved or to follow it, unless you really want to know who you are or what this life is. So they haven't even set a foot on the path, but most people who are meditating are searching for the ox, looking for this true self. And then there's various stages. You can go out and look at the pictures hanging above the coat rack out there. They include, seeing the traces and getting a glimpse, and then catching the ox and taming the ox, and riding it home and then forgetting about it, and then returning to your original ground, and then entering your life, after having gone through these experiences. And so this is one way of categorizing our practice, but when I told Yugen I was going to talk about these, he said, well, everybody's going to come up to you and ask you, which level am I at now? And so this is just one way of categorizing things, and in a way they're just signposts. I mean, and they don't have a lot of meaning in one way, but in another we can get stuck at any one of these places. And so this is our practice, is to constantly let go of whatever we're holding on to. And we can hold on to, particularly people who have an experience of seeing the ox. They think that's the end of it, and I think that's only stage 4 in this list. But let's talk about this first stage of searching for the ox, because that's the place where most people really are. And that's where their practice is, still searching, but not quite sure. Somehow we think there's something missing, which has been there from the beginning, so it takes training to realize it. And there's a story from the Lotus Sutra of Enyadatta, and she was a narcissistic woman who used to constantly look at herself in the mirror and groom herself. And one day when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see anything. She didn't see her reflection. And the sutra doesn't explain why not, but it's necessary for the story. I don't know, maybe she held the mirror backwards or something. But she panicked. She knew she had a head, but she couldn't find it. And so she was searching all over for her head. Now, I think we've had a similar experience. For example, you might put down your keys, or your glasses, or your wallet, and you knew you had it, but you can't find it. It's not like I don't remember if I had it or not. I mean, you know you had it. They must be somewhere because you need them. So you have the strong resolve to find those keys. So when we search for the ox, we think something might be missing, but we're not quite sure what it is. Whether we have it or where it might be, or what good is it if we find it. But still there's something we feel is missing. So here's another one of the commentaries that was written about this stage. It says, why the search? The ox has never been missing from the beginning. However, it so happens that the herdsman turned away from himself, from his own ox, Thus his own ox became a stranger to him, and eventually lost himself in the far, dusty regions. The whole mountains recede further and further. The herdsman finds himself unexpectedly on tangled path. Desire for profit and fear of loss flare up like a flaming conflagration, and fears of right and wrong arise in opposition to one another, like spears on a battlefield. So the ox has never been missing from the beginning, but we wander far away, further and further from the whole mountain, get consumed by the desire for fame and profit and recognition, and we fear loss and being insignificant. And the poem says, in the origin, there's no trace. Who can be there? Confused, he gets into a deep place filled with thick fog and tangled briars. Unbeknown, he's already turning home. As a guest, leading the ox by the nose. Yet, under the tree by the side of the water, his song sounds dispirited. See, in the origin, originally, there's no trace, there's no fixed thing. So, where are we looking? So, not knowing that the ox is right here, we start looking all kinds of other places. Confused, we get further and further away, but this very confusion, that very searching for the ox, already that is the ox. Yet we get discouraged because in the song, his song sounds dispirited. I remember I had a student once who practiced with Trungpa Rinpoche, who had been practicing for a while, and said, I'm really getting discouraged with my practice. And he said, oh, now you're really making progress. Yeah. That's good, getting discouraged and bored. So in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which I really enjoyed reading many years ago, Joseph Campbell writes about heroes from myth and from history. In every culture around the globe, where they follow the same trajectory, the hero and heroine always start out, and they have to go through many trials, and that's what this searching for the ox is, going through all kinds of difficulties. And then they have some great insight when they return to the origin with this insight, and they use it for good. It's the kind of journey that many people have had. So we always start, we have to put one foot on the path, searching for the ox. So we have to let our mind quiet down. It's the activity of the mind that prevents us from seeing the ox. So one Zen master said, what is termed Zazen is no more than looking into one's own mind. And that's what Dogen said. He said to study the Buddha way is to study the self. That's to look into our own mind and see what's going on there. I mean, I don't think you need to look at the content of your thoughts, but it's the nature of your thoughts. What are the thoughts? What is their nature? And if you look carefully, you see thoughts arise and then they persist and then they drop away. There's nothing fixed about them. They're constantly changing. That we just keep trying to grab onto them. So, an analogy that I use for how to quiet the mind is actually learning to ride a bicycle. Okay. A bicycle is unstable. Just mechanically, it's unstable. And as the rider of a bicycle, you're constantly having to adjust your balance and the bicycle, otherwise you're going to fall over. And our mind is unstable. Yeah. It's constantly grabbing off to thoughts and ideas and projections. And so if you sit on a bicycle, it's going to fall over. If you just pump the pedals and point it and don't do anything else, you're going to fall over too, because you have to constantly be adjusting it. And I taught all my kids how to ride bicycles, and learned something very interesting. I mentioned my two oldest sons are 52 years old. They're twins, and they just went on a 350-mile bike ride on the only continuous bike path in the United States of 350 miles from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. Had a great time. If I remember teaching them, it was a challenge. Because when you're riding a bike and the bike starts to tip to the right, what's your natural tendency? To turn the handlebars to the left. And when you do that, you know what happens? The front wheel lines up perfectly for you to fall over to the right. So I kept trying to think of how to teach them, and I realized you can't do that. If you're falling to the right, you have to turn the handlebar to the right. And then as you keep going, it straightens up, and then you can turn back to the left. That was my scientific mind trying to, but say, don't follow what you think your mind wants you to do. Follow what your body needs you to do. So, yeah. So, like I said, a good bike rider is constantly adjusting. And it's almost imperceptible. And so the same thing when your mind starts going around in all sorts of directions. It's chaotic, but when it's trained, you can bring it back to your focus, even before a thought starts to arise to distract you. Now, I want to emphasize there's nothing wrong with thinking. It's a very important part, of our life to analyze things. But it's the ego-attached thinking that gets us in trouble. We're always thinking about me. Yeah. So when you're sitting and you're focusing on your breathing, or you're working on a koan, or just sitting, just keep bringing your mind back to the focus. It doesn't take much to distract the mind, but just keep bringing it back. Otherwise, like the bicycle, you're just going to fall over. In the last century, there was a Japanese Zen master. His name is Soyen Shaku, and he sent his students to this country at the beginning of the last century. And some of his works have been translated, and he said, Zazen is not a difficult task. Just free yourself from all incoming thoughts and hold your mind against them like a great iron wall. Think of your own think of your own room as the whole world, and that all sentient beings are sitting there with you as one. I read that. Hold your mind like a great iron wall. It's a very masculine image, isn't it? Yeah. And I did that for years. It's very exhausting, actually. Very tiring. But I realized after years I could let every thought just come in and dissolve it into my hara in my breath. I didn't have to fight against it or engage it. So one of the monks that Soyen Shaku sent to this country is a man named Yogen Senzaki. And he settled down in Los Angeles and started Zen practice there. And he's buried in a cemetery in Los Angeles. And every New Year's when I was living there, I used to go with Maizumi Roshi and other monks and members of the Zen Center to the graveyard, and we'd do a service for Yogen Senzaki. And we were, Maizumi Roshi sat with him, and we were kind of in his lineage. So this holding your mind against thoughts like a great iron wall, came through to us. But like I said, there's other ways to practice. Maizumi Roshi talked about filling up with each breath and giving away with each exhalation. So I think of it when you breathe in that the breath goes into the hara, the lower abdomen. The lower hara is like as one taste of the one taste of the Dharma. So you breathe everything in. You breathe all of your thoughts, judgments, opinions, ideas, projections. Breathe everything in, sensations, and then it dissolves in that ocean of the hara. You breathe in the whole universe. And then when you exhale, it's all released. You breathe in everything, and then when you breathe out, you let go of everything. It all becomes, I don't know mind, or mu, or just this breath. If you're counting your breath, it's just the sound of that number that resonates through the whole universe. So you just bring in everything, any pain you might have in your knees or your back, the cold air in the morning. Fill up your hara and let it dissolve. Now back to Enyadatta, who thought she lost her head. Her close friends persuaded her that she had always had her head, and gradually she came to half believe it. Her subconscious mind began to accept the fact that perhaps she was deluded into thinking she had lost her head. So her receiving reassurance from her friends can be equated to hearing the Roshi's commentaries or Teisho's Initially, they're difficult to understand, but listening to them attentively, every word sinks into your subconscious, and you reach the point where you begin to think, is that really true? I wonder. Yes, maybe it is. So Inyadata was beginning to look for the traces. So one of the things that I really like about Zen is that I don't tell you to believe anything. My teacher didn't tell me to believe anything either. You have to figure it all out for yourself. So that's kind of comforting. You aren't going to be burned at the stake for heresy. So all of our understanding comes from our own experience. But there needs to be a shift in your attitude in order to practice the Buddha way. Like what happened to the Buddha when he experienced the pain of life and sickness and old age and death. At some point, you decide that it's important to resolve these issues, and your whole being shifts. So people are attracted to this practice for a wide range of reasons, and all of them are valid. But newcomers to Zen do have a few things in common. They're not satisfied with their life as it is, or have big questions about the meaning of their life. And that dissatisfaction could range from mild discomfort to dis-ease or to severe anxiety and depression. But there's a recognition that one has to change one's life, or there'll be no peace, no tranquility, and no equanimity. So at that stage, we give rise to a shift in our life, and we begin to search for the ox. It could be that you took a class on Buddhism, or you heard the teachings that enabled you to intellectually grasp something of the meaning of truth. Or in the present day, you looked at a YouTube video. Maybe you met a spiritual friend. Or maybe you had an experience, a glimpse of emptiness that was beyond your usual perception, and you didn't know what to do with it. You want to understand it. Dogen, in several chapters of his writings, emphasizes turning the light around and looking within. The ox has not been missing from the beginning. In Fukan Zazengi, which means the universal promotion of Zazen, he said, you should stop the intellectual activity of pursuing words and learn the stepping back of turning the light around and shining back. Body and mind will naturally drop off, and the original face will appear. And in Ehe Koroku, he wrote, everyone without exception holds on to the jewel that glows in the night. Unless we turn the light around and shine it within, how can we hold the jewel close when we're lost in the outlying countries? So I, had read about meditation and was interested in alternate states of reality and started pursuing it. But for me, it wasn't solely a matter of starting to meditate. It permeated every aspect of my life. It affected who I hung out with. Yeah. So I quit spending time with old friends who just wanted to party and obliterate themselves. I prefer to spend my time with friends who wanted to obliterate themselves through meditation. And I was working in a university, and I didn't use my vacation time to go to wonderful places on beaches and tropical isles. I used all of my vacation to attend session. Can you imagine? If the shift does not occur off the cushion, as well as on the cushion, it's only a partial shift. Each of us has to follow our own heart and go at our own pace. But once I saw the value of Zen in my life and in the lives of others, I did not hold back. So these shifts help in the search for the ox. So how do you know it's the right path? You don't. You just have to start walking it. And if it feels right, your faith will kick in. And once you're able to maintain focus in your mind, and fueled by this faith and your determination to find the ox, you'll be ready for the next stage, which is seeing the traces of the ox, the footsteps. We'll talk about that next time.